How are you today, Brianna?
Great, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
No problem. Glad to do it. I hope I'll be able to help you with some information today.
So to get started, how did the four men, the original four that participated in the lunch counter sit-in in North Carolina, how did they prepare for the sit-ins?
By preparing, you mean what did they do prior to their coming
Yes.
here? Um, they actually met together in a dorm room on the campus of North Carolina A&T College, North Carolina Agricultural and Technical College, here in Greensboro on Sunday evening, January 31st, 1960. And the subject matter had been tossed around by not only the four men, but by other students during this time period about working to find a way that was used nonviolent direct action. And in doing that, many students across the South had talked about this, and some had actually gone and sat down at lunch counters in various cities. But out of the experience that Joseph McNeil had when he had ridden the bus back to Greensboro from his home and discovering, in fact, that he would not be allowed to go into the bus station restaurant and sit down at the counter and have a meal. He was hungry, and of course his frustration passed back to his conversation with his friends that it was time to do something, that it was not just for their good, but for the good of other African Americans as well. And they felt that the time was right for doing that. So they actually had plans and strategies in mind when they came to the lunch counter on that Monday afternoon after classes were over. They walked a little over a mile from the campus to the store here in downtown Greensboro, the F.W. Woolworth Company, which was a 5 and 10 cent store or value discount kind of store. A number of items could be purchased here, and the lunch counter was for African Americans off limit. They could not sit down at the counter. They could order from the menu, but they would have to stand at the end of the counter, wait for the food to be prepared, pay for it, and then carry it out. They were not allowed to sit down at the lunch counter at that time. So when those young men got to the store on that afternoon, it was a little over an hour before the store would actually close. And they put their strategy in place. The first thing that they did was to purchase some school supplies and some toiletries. We were told that Franklin McCain, one of the four, actually purchased some toothpaste. And their reason for purchasing the school supplies and the toiletries was so that they would have a receipt. When they went to the lunch counter, they knew that it was very unlikely that they would actually be served. But they wanted to be able to say, you've already served us in another part of the store. Here are our receipts. Here are items that we've purchased. Why can't we be served in this part of the store? You've taken our money there. What difference is it here at the lunch counter? And the waitress who told them that they would have to do the customary thing of standing at the end of the lunch counter did not dissuade them. They continued to sit there. The manager, who was Mr. Harris, told them that if they did not leave, he was going to call the police. And in fact, he did call the police. They didn't move. And the chief of police came over that afternoon. The police station in the downtown area was not far away from the store. So the police chief came over. He looked around and assessed the situation and told Mr. Harris that he was not going to arrest the young men, which would have been the customary thing to do if they refused to leave a seat at a segregated lunch counter. He told Mr. Harris that the store is going to close in a little over an hour. The 4 young men will go back to the college campus. That will be the last that we hear of them. However, it was not. Not only did the 4 come back the next day, but they brought over 20 other A&T college students with them. And within days, more and more A&T students joined the sit-in, as well as African-American women from Bennett College, which is a private female HBCU here in Greensboro. And they were also joined by white women from what was then Woman's College. It's now the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. They joined the sit-ins. Eventually, students from Guilford College and Greensboro College would join the sit-ins, as well as high school students from all-black Dudley High School. And then, of course, some other citizens of the city as well.
Why do you, excuse me, sorry. You can go ahead.
The lunch counter sit-ins lasted from February 1 through July 25th of 1960. There was some time in there when it was kind of called off with a promise that the city leaders would talk about it and discuss some things with the students and other persons in the city, and that nothing happened to change, so the sit-in started up again.
So before the Greensboro sit-ins, there were many other sit-ins around the country and in different cities, but they weren't...
I wouldn't say many. There were some isolated cases, but there was not a movement, and the sit-ins here at the lunch counter in Greensboro is given, I guess, the notoriety that this was the start of the movement. There had been some isolated cases prior to the sit-ins here at Woolworths, but this is the place where it became a movement because of the organization of students sitting in at the lunch counter every day on a rotating basis. As soon as one student was up off of the stool, another sat in their place. And because it was student-led, that, of course, attracted many other students from other cities across the state of North Carolina, and then to other places across the South and Midwest. And it was the appeal of young people being a part of the civil rights movement with the lunch counter sit-ins. And they followed the example of the men that we call the A&T 4. They're also called the Greensboro 4.
The NAACP is often mentioned in civil rights movements. Can you describe what that is and the impact it has had?
The NAACP was the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Now, I can't give you the timeline as far as their being founded. I know it was founded through the work of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois and others. And its purpose was just almost as the name says, for the advancement of colored people or African Americans in relation to the laws of the land, which of course included voter registration and actually being able to vote. They also worked very diligently to help end lynchings across the South particularly, and other instances of where there was racial injustice or other things in relation to African Americans receiving full citizenship rights. So it also offered some legal ramifications in helping people who went through the courts in cases where they were being denied their rights. for the most part, and you probably need to do some research for that. I can't speak as specifically about it as I would like, but in most cases it was community-based, even though it was a national organization. Many cities and communities had their own branches of the NAACP. So it was sort of also a little bit of collective bargaining power and empowerment for African Americans as well.
What do you think the impact was of this particular stand? We try to include in the History Day projects political impact, social impact, and economic impact. Could you speak to each one of those?
Well, let me talk first about economic impact, because that's actually what helped to break the back of segregation across the country. Here at Woolworths, because people were not able to sit at the lunch counter, the service there was limited, and after a while, people of other races, whites, stopped even sitting at the lunch counter, and many of them actually stopped sitting or even coming into the store because they did not want to get caught up in all of the sit-ins that were going on. So with all of the efforts of the store to continue in business, with people not eating at the lunch counter, people not coming into the store and shopping, the store was losing a lot of money. And to our knowledge, the corporate headquarters, which was based in New York, spoke to Mr. Harris and told him that he needed to get past the idea of a segregated lunch counter because the store was losing too much money. And the store was suffering because of the sit-ins, and it was basically lunch counters and other restaurants, movie theaters, hotels, motels, and like that were segregated. That was in the South. So in the North, where many of the lunch counters were already integrated, they also became impacted by the sit-ins in the South. And that was because many people, and I would suspect some of them who belong to organizations like the NAACP or CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, they were participating in the sit-ins, and the way that they participated was to discourage people from shopping at stores like Woolworths or McCory's, any national kind of chain stores. So, say for instance, in the North, maybe in New York, where people could, black people could sit down at the lunch counter and have a meal, what they did was to picket outside of the Woolworth stores. They carried picket signs. They boycotted shopping in stores like Woolworths, so that it had a national impact, economic impact. As people, even in the North, they carried signs that basically said, do not shop in Woolworths. They will not serve Negro customers, or they will not allow Negroes to eat at the lunch counter. So that it then carried a national impact, not just an impact in Greensboro or just in North Carolina or just in the southern states. It became all across the South and the North as well. So then with the social aspect of the lunch counter sit-ins, this was, even as Dr. King said later, that the sit-ins that started here in Greensboro, the sit-in movement that started in Greensboro, did a couple things. First of all, it brought young people into the civil rights movement. And secondly, it revitalized the civil rights movement. Now, one of the bigger issues or bigger items that was prior to the lunch counter sit-ins and taking on a more of a national scope was the Emmett Till murder. And then also, of course, in 1954, the case that went before the Supreme Court, Brown v. the Board of Education, that got national attention. And then in 1955, also with the Montgomery bus boycott, which Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott, that was, again, people's attention was turned toward a group of people working to accomplish the same goal. So from 1955, especially with the Montgomery bus boycott, there had been sort of a lull in the civil rights movement. There had been some isolated cases. People were working for voter registration and those kinds of things for getting blacks employed in various jobs that had not been available to blacks. But the civil rights movement kind of surged again with the beginning of the sit-in movement. Of course, it started with Woolworths here in Greensboro and then spread all across the state of North Carolina and then also across the South and Midwest as well.
Why was the idea of persistence and nonviolence so important to the 4 original men who participated in these sit-ins?
Well, when we talk about anything in relation to the civil rights movement, you also have to go back and look at the writings of Mahatma Gandhi from India and his influence on the civil rights movement. And that influence came with the understanding of how much more impactful it was when you had people coming together, that some event was created, and through that event it was to draw attention to the fact that laws or practices were unfair to the majority of the people. And of course, with the civil rights movement, it was, essentially the effect or the impact on African Americans, but it also helped poor people, regardless of the color of their skin, as well. So, with the impact of Mahatma Gandhi's writings and the impact of how that actually went into play, nonviolence was the way to go, and that included patience and persistence. And for most of the adults who were, had been involved in the civil rights movement prior to 1960, it became waiting for segregation to come to an end, of doing one thing and another and continuing and waiting until segregation came to an end. That was a lot of what people believed prior to 1960, when young people became involved in the movement. Still with nonviolence, because that was an essential part of it, never to return violence with violence. But with young people, it became more aggressive, not waiting for segregation to come to an end, but pushing for segregation to come to an end. So in April of 1960, in Raleigh, North Carolina, Raleigh is our state's capital. And I never even asked you where you and Ms. Master may have told me what part of Iowa.
We're in the western section right across the river from Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay. So right here in North Carolina and other parts of the South, with this movement, bringing young people from different college campuses to Raleigh in April of 1960. These were basically college students who wanted a more aggressive approach toward bringing an end to segregation, not to wait for it to happen, but to do voter registration drives, to be the ones to sit at lunch counters, marching, demonstrating, bringing people together. And that was when SNCC was founded. SNCC was the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. It's pronounced SNCC, S-N-I-C-K, but the initials were SNCC. And they became the youth movement. They were the ones, and they actually or the organization was formed along with Mrs. Ella Baker, who had worked with Dr. King and others in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference prior to 1960. But she felt that that organization was a little bit too top-heavy with leaders and too top-heavy with males at leadership. She thought that young people should be a great part of the move to help to work to bring it into segregation. So SNCC became the youth movement, and as it was originally formed in April of 1960, they met, and students from HBCUs across the South met, and they formed the organization. They met at actually Shaw University in Raleigh, which is the state capital of North Carolina. And as they met together and organized, it was all about the youth in leadership as well as in those who were out carrying out the business of helping to bring it into segregation.
Overall, what do you think the largest legacy was left from this sit-in movement?
Well, a great part of it is that because it wasn't just an isolated event. It didn't just occur on one day. Those four young men were actually involved in the movement itself. They were inspirational. They never started out to be heroes. And even to this day, if you would ask Joseph McNeil, for instance, did he ever think about any notoriety coming from all of this? His answer would be no. They saw that wrongs was done, in many cases against African Americans. They wanted to be the difference. They wanted to be the change that they wanted to see, which of course was a part of Mahatma Gandhi's writings as well. But they knew that it was really going to take ordinary people coming together to help bring about change. It wasn't so much that it was going to be just about the leaders of the civil rights movement, but it was going to take ordinary people working together to bring about change.
A few months ago, I had sent a letter to Joseph McNeil, but so far I have not gotten any reply from him. Do you have any contact information for him?
No, I don't. How did you contact him? Through mail?
Mail, yes.
Okay, no, I don't have an address and for him.
Okay.
Let me see. Let me ask to see if we do have one and if we can give it out. Hold on just a moment.
Okay. She's checking.
Got some pretty good information.
Yeah.
I don't know what I did wrong. I'm going to have to go back and look at my computer.
She's checking to see if they have like an address and if they can give it out.
Well, I found a address for the place where he worked in New Bedford, but, or not this guy, the other guy, but...
sorry. The information, the way that we contact him, we cannot give that information out.
Okay.
I would suggest, I don't know if he has a Facebook page or.
I can look, yes.
Yeah, see, or some other social media contact might be a way of doing it.
Do you have any suggestions where I could find some valuable resources for my project?
Oh, okay, let me see.
Do you have any more questions?
Oh, I was trying to see if I could look on.
She knows a particular book. Hopefully. You turned your phone off, right?
It's still recording.
See if he has a Facebook.
Have you ever looked at the video, Eyes on the Prize?
No.
That gives you, it's like about 7 or 8 parts of it.
Okay.
But it gives you a good look at the entire civil rights movement.
Mhm. Is that available on YouTube?
There have been some on YouTube. I don't know that it still is because there was a question about rights and everything. But
Okay.
if it's not, somebody may have uploaded it onto there. But it was through, I think, PBS.
Okay.
But you can probably access it that way.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's see. There's also a website, and your teacher might have to actually access it for you. It's called civilrightsteaching.org,
Okay.
and they probably can give you some information
Okay.
or some a lot of probably a lot of different. A lot of resources and websites
Okay.
directed, but probably if you just Google or search for any kind of anything in relation to civil rights
Mhm.
movement, it probably will come up with a number of
Mhm.
things.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have for you. Thank you for taking your time to answer them and talk with me.
Sure, no problem.
They
no problem.
certainly helped my project a lot.
Good. And have you been to our website?
Yes.
And there's a timeline there, and you can access some things that way too.
Okay. Thank you so
All right.
much.
You're very welcome.
It was nice speaking to you.
Nice speaking with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.